with Faith Clarke. We are going to be talking about team building. We're going to be talking about onboarding that team. We're going to talk about all things team, as well as the opportunities and obstacles that face business owners all the time. I, of course, have my mug. This is we've got this branding. This is a custom designed mug for me by Rebecca Graves Pottery. Faith has hers. This was actually commissioned. Oh, it has a cat hair. You can tell I live with cats, as always. But this was a commissioned mug for me by one of my favorite clients. It has a horrible, horrible statement on it. It says, "You're just income to me." And that sounds horrible, but it has a really great story behind it that I'll tell sometime. If you're ever interested, just let me know. But yes, welcome, Faith. Thank you so much for being here. We are going to have a chit chat in the time it takes to drink 1 cup. You have your cup there. What does it look like?
This cup is actually empty. I should get a refill, but I don't know. I have a thing about orange, the earth tone. So when I saw it, it's lovely and heavy, and the inside is green, my favorite. So heavy, lovely orange cup, but the coffee just finished. So
during our talk, we will fill up your cup, hopefully, with delicious team building talk. Wonderful. Faith, do you want to introduce yourself to everyone so they know who you are and what you do in the world?
Thanks, Marissa. And first of all, I love being in conversations with you. So I'm Faith Clarke, organizational health and teamwork strategist. That's like the official thing. But I'm a human who loves I love to watch connections happen. Connections between humans, connections between ideas, connections in systems. I used to, in a previous life, be a computer engineer. Things connect, anything can connect with anything else if we give it enough time, and we give ourselves enough time to see what that connection might be and to understand the connection. And so in my work with teams and my work with organizations, I'm looking for the connections that are healthy, that we can do more of them. I'm looking for the ways that these connections happen in magical, powerful ways, so we can integrate it into the schedule deliberately instead of kind of doing it as a one-off at 8 o'clock at night when everybody's done with work. And I'm looking for the ways that the connections are not good, that they're energy parasites eating the connections out. And let's rejig it so that teams can be more effective, so that people can work together really powerfully without burnout, without feeling crappy, without everybody hating work, without work stripping us of our reason for living.
Yeah, one of the things that I always remind people, if they're listening to this and they're like, I don't have a team yet, the team starts with one. The team starts with you. As even if you're a solo business owner right now, this is also applicable because, one, we should all have an employee manual for ourselves. We are an employee of our own business when we are even the owner. But the things that we start to build with ourselves, where we insist on accessibility, where we insist on some of these, inclusive, that begins with us, doesn't it?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, inclusion starts with you being willing to let yourself be seen and to say yes to the spaces where you need support. Because if we won't give ourselves the permission to need support, whatever support looks like, a cup of coffee, then when somebody comes to you and says what their support need is, or says how they take in information, or whatever it is, we're going to shut that down as laziness, as whatever it is. Whatever our self-judgment is, that's what we reflect out on our staff and on our team. So as we learn to say yes to all of who we are, so much easier to build nourishing workspaces so that people feel like we've said yes to them too.
Absolutely. That is powerful. Okay, so you have a new project that you're working on, and I want to talk about it. We've been going back and forth a little bit over the last couple of days about team onboarding. Now, what is onboarding?
It's a lovely word, right? I had my son draw me a picture of a boat. I'm going to do it with one of my posts sometime soon, because this idea of a ship and a ladder and people trying to get onto it sounds like yucky for me because I don't swim well. There's a lot of effort. You're moving up to this big thing, like you have to traverse this treacherous pathway. Yeah. Really and truly, onboarding is supposed to be this experience that new hires go through to help them be initiated or integrated and supported and connected to the new organization. And so you have a new person, they need to get clear on their job role, yes, but even if they knew exactly the job, if they don't know who you are and what your company stands for and who the company is and how they're connected to their other people that they're going to work with, they're not going to be able to be effective. So the end goal of onboarding is this deep connection with organization, with role, with team, so that people remain engaged and people feel clear and people feel like their new home, their new work home is a work home. What really is happening is that we're running through a checklist of, okay, do you have the computer? Do you have the login for, Adobe Suite? Let's make sure the database has you in there. Oh my goodness, payroll doesn't have you. Go hand in so we do this list of tasks. And at the end of the time, what's the essential knowledge that we want to make sure people know? And what are the clear values we want to make sure that we're nourishing? So often staff feel not depressed, maybe they do feel depressed, but they feel disappointed at the end of the onboarding experience, while the managers feel overwhelmed and tired, But that's what onboarding is, both what it should not be, but is largely what's happening.
Yeah, I've been in a few organizations where my first day was basically a gigantic checklist, and somebody was assigned to make sure that all of those pieces were checked off. Now, I did start one company, and this was 2006, so not a recent, what was interesting was that they had actually this whole kind of animated onboarding process. So it was Amy was the person that was the animated person that brought me through the whole entire process and did
really
oh yes, it was quite extensive. It was interesting. I know that some people did not like it. Some people loved it. I thought it was amazing because, of course, I was a nerd and loved the idea that I didn't have to actually talk to anybody when I was learning about because you're so I'm shy. I'm an introvert. You're starting a new business, like a new role. Sometimes it can be a little
overwhelming
to have everybody coming at you and you're supposed to remember everybody's names. So it was
what they do and how they're connected. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was lovely for someone like me, where I sat there for 3 days and basically learned all about the company through this animated, and people still checked in on me, and they were still you had to go to HR. But for me, it was great. Now, like I said, it wasn't great for everybody. And I love that you use this visualization of the boat. It was funny when you said this onboarding, my mind actually pictured 4 or 5 different ways of getting on the boat. So one, you had said kind of a ladder. I was kind of picturing those kind of wobbly ladders from the playground where it's just a chain and you just kind of have to scramble across. And then I was thinking, well, what if someone has mobility issues? We have to have a solid ramp,
a plank,
a plank, someone who has, do they have the good balance that they can actually just go on this tight. So I thought of all these different things. Now, isn't that what happens with onboarding? We kind of create this process for one person, and then, it's not necessarily going to be the right person. How do you recommend? What do you look at when you work with a company to talk about all of the different ways of getting on the boat?
So I was so excited when you started that about your way, because I think the thing that's missing is that the core pieces of an onboarding experience with the humans. Yes. And we keep talking, humans are not like a monolith. Nope. So the humans are all different, and even taking in information or expressing information, all these experiences really need to be thought about. And what's the best way to help this human have this kind of experience? Not just the new hire, though. The team that the person is being connected to is a team of humans, and they already have, whether it's explicit or not, a culture, a way of being. What's the way that this team will be best able to integrate this person into their team? And then, of course, the manager leader who is holding this responsibility, given all of everything in their lives, what's the best way? So when somebody said to me, Faith, what do you recommend according to best practices? I'm like, first, best practices is what you can cope with first, because what does it matter, best practice, if you can't do it? So I really try to, in any development of an onboarding process, and I'm calling it the onboarding roadmap, It's an adjustable roadmap. It's like my screen that's adjusting to the size of the font that's websites. Adjustable is adjusting to the size of the screen. We have to build it with a space to implement small portions of it depending on who people are. And so that means looking back through all of the components, what's the information that we feel a person needs to know? How can we help them know that? Who is the best fit for that person, and in setting that up in place? That's the first kind of thing. And then for this manager, what's their schedule like? I actually don't believe we should block out standard time onboarding. I do think that within this person's life cycle and work cycle, there are probably some organic, natural ways that we could integrate it, giving that manager the power to do that, to repurpose some group and team experiences, so that instead of new experiences, this experience that we used to call, Coffee with Bob, we're now using it as an immersive onboarding community experience and having several of those. So being flexible in our minds as to what does a person need, what does a team need, and what does this manager, team leader need based on the life they're living right now.
Yeah, I love what you said too about the best practices. What can you do? And I think this is something that we need to look at with companies, because, and whether they're small, one person, or multi, the reality is that we're trying to do, well, like, okay, I got to do this, I got to do that, I got to do this for accessibility. But if you can't do it like well, it's going to come off badly, right? And so it's like, one of those things where it's like, don't start before you're ready. Even though it's opposite of what we tell people, but like, it's one of those things where it's like, don't bite off more than you can chew. All those kind of like, analogies and that we have about that. How does a company know that they're, oh yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just thinking about this question of accessibility, right? Even in an onboarding process, I've said, make it responsive to the who's. You aren't going to be able to make it responsive to every single type of who in this moment. So then it's also an intentional decision. Who are we making this accessible to? Whoever we've decided we're making this accessible to, then let's do the work to implement that and be okay implementing it poorly. If, like, in many cases, we have people already in the workplace that we have not kind of built appropriate accessible structures for them. If we've decided that we're going to try adding this into our onboarding and on our staff support, be okay with the feedback from those people that says, oops, that's not so good. This wasn't so helpful to me. That didn't work. And say, oh, good. Thank you for helping me with that. And then change it for the next round.
Yeah. And part of that is creating that environment to let people know that they can give feedback and that it won't be met with punishment or, ignoring. And that's an interesting way to create a culture, because I think we could probably all name companies that we've worked for or consulted with where they think they've implemented this amazing solution without any feedback. And then they're like, ta-da, like pat us on the back. Isn't this great? And they don't want to hear the feedback, how it's not working for people, because they just put all this time and money into something that they don't even understand why they're really doing it.
Right. Because who is it for? Like, who is it to serve and who's using it? Yep.
Yeah.
Didn't do that work.
Yeah. And so it's part of like, is really knowing, I love that, knowing who it actually is for, so that you can actually create an inclusive and workable, usable plan to do it. So you're not just doing something to check off the box, that you're actually doing something that does help create accessibility. How does a company know that they've done a good job outside of like direct feedback?
I think companies know whether they're doing a good job or not. It's just that onboarding is like breakfast, it seems. People feel we need to do it, so we just do it, even though we may not be having healthy breakfast. But I think most of us know the muffin and the coffee, probably not so healthy. I think that we know what are the indicators in our organization that is probably not working out. The manager who is doing it, or the team leader, or the business owner who is doing it, didn't feel good while it was happening. I feel that that's a good indicator that it wasn't really being effective, because I think we're trying to integrate into culture. And when we've been successful integrating into culture, we know, because that's an emotional kind of type of connection, not just with the facts. The other thing is that if the employee is still saying, so I'm not sure how, then we probably didn't do a good job. Not because not being sure isn't just a part of life, But at the end of our process, that person should feel like they know how to get answers to what they want. And so not knowing isn't something that brings anxiety. Like, I don't know, and I don't know what I should do with not knowing, right? So I'm
Yeah.
not sure. Lack of clarity is always a big indicator. And engagement, it's interesting, right? People come on excited. When you see a quick decline in staff excitement and interest, we didn't do a good job. Either we didn't do a good job, or what we allowed people to see in onboarding is different from what they got in recruiting. So there's a
Mhm.
mismatch. And I do think our onboarding processes aren't being effective if they're not well tied up with recruiting, because the end product of recruiting is the starting part of onboarding. And when people come through and then they're like, wait, this place doesn't look the way I thought it would. Or when the people in onboarding are saying, this person, why would they think this person was a good fit? Then that whole process is in need of some more support.
Mm-hmm. I always think of when I worked in corporate, my last corporate job, we hired a new person who is incredibly brilliant, masters. Like, the interview, we were just like, wow, like excited. And then when she started, we were going through kind of like the onboarding training, and one of like the first jobs was to go through and look at, like the incoming email into an inbox. And I'm a very like, what do you think? Like, I don't want to just tell somebody, because
Right.
one, they might have a better idea than me. Two, that's the way I learn, is like, kind of like, do we hypothesize? Do we test it out? Are we a scientist? And not everyone was like that. And, I just kept saying, like, what do you think we should do with the email? Like, what does it feel like to you? Or what does that look like to you? Or, I was trying to use these kind of words, and, she snapped. She's just like, I think it's unrealistic that you expect me to know what to do with this email, after a week of being here. And I was like,
Right.
okay, all right. That's an interesting feedback, because I was like, wow, okay, I don't know how to respond to this. I'm not the person to train you in this. And so I went to my manager and I said, I'm not the person to train. And she's like, but you're the person that knows this the most. I'm like, but I'm not the person to train this person.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So it was an interesting opportunity to create a process where we looked at different learning styles or different teaching styles, and we paired them up with different people.
Yes. And that's beautiful, because in that situation, hopefully the negative, you're a very balanced, maybe, manager, because somebody else could have blown up on her and
Right.
then created a situation that resulted in the fast turnover we see in many spaces, right? People come in, they're disillusioned, and they leave. And there are tiny moments like those that are opportunities for us to see what needs to be tweaked and up-leveled in our onboarding process and our onboarding experiences that could really go sour really fast, and we don't know. But yes, having that sense of how do people take information in, I think, is crucial. And how do people relate? So whether that's, people have different positions on personality profiles and stuff, and I don't believe that they are accurate, but there are tools for us to have these conversations in really respectful ways. Says, I understand that you are different, and your difference is not a bad thing. You just get energy from people and I don't. So in which case, how do we do this? Because I think if the onboarding is collaborative, how do I introduce you to a whole new world that you are expected to function in massively and beautifully and thrive in and feel like this is your whole work home? How would I do that? It's arrogant for me to think I can create that experience for you without your participation in telling me what you would need to make this really mutually beneficial.
Now, I know we think about like onboarding success or hiring people's success is that they come into the job, they have all the tools that they need, and that they are, integrated into the team, and they have a thriving career. But I have always thought that good onboarding is also about helping people realize that maybe this isn't the best position for them, and it allows them to quickly make a decision whether they want to keep going or go back to looking for another job. And I think we don't talk about that enough, because it can actually be quite costly for the company and the employee if they're in a position where they wait to the 3 months of if there's a 3 month, what do you call it? temporary, yeah,
probation or whatever.
probation or whatever, or the 6 month in some cases, that can be quite costly for a company. So I think like if your onboarding is a week or too long, and you can at the end of it be like, the employee has the option of saying, this is not the place for me. And let's talk about culture and how that plays into that too, because in our case, we had a really small team. And one of the things that became really clear is that this person really needed like just very cut and dry, like, here's your task, here's the whole steps to do it, please go through these steps and do it. And we hadn't created anything like that. We all kind of worked off of like, this might work best today.
Improv experiment. Yeah.
There was a lot of, and I love that position, because we were encouraged to just make stuff up as we went along. If it worked, then we might do it again with tweaks, but we didn't have that set of lists. And so at the end of the, few weeks, we realized, and she realized too, that this probably wouldn't work out very well, because it just didn't fit with her ability to work as her best. And there wasn't anything wrong with that. But we looked at it kind of going, oh, that was failed, or like, oh, we had to like let the person go, or they quit right away. Whereas it was just like, you kind of got your toe wet into it. So can you talk a little bit about how culture plays into the onboarding, and how like a success is maybe not necessarily what we think it is?
Yeah, well, I'm in some order. I'll maybe touch on all those things. What you said reminded me of when I'm onboarding staff at home, because I also have a home team for my son with autism. And when I'm onboarding staff at home, they don't know that it's onboarding, because it looks like it's the initial interview and then the follow-up interview and then but they're really a series of experiences. And at the end of each experience, I'm like, this is not commitment yet. Just, if you want to back out, this is a great point to back out. And I have woven in like 3 or 4 within the first month of such. And that doesn't mean people don't get paid and anything like that. But I am honoring the fact that you can't know, and I can't know what I don't know. And so giving us, because I found that I fell in love with people and then they left. So I'm giving us both this opportunity to know what we know and assess at each step, is this good? And I think in the corporate space, I am torn between whether that should be at recruiting, or if it should be, because I don't think it's possible fully in a distant process like recruiting is, to know what you can know by being on the ground. And I do think that there is a challenge to making that process less static and more human, so that people can know more deeply what they need to know. I do think that the way I see culture playing a part, when I use the word culture is this combination of how people act and what people think and how people feel on repeat. It's a habit of thinking, acting, feeling together, and the experiences are created out on repeat. And I do think that onboarding is a team. Let me put my hands up. This is a team. It's like a container, like a pot. A human comes in, and the entire system has to shift and adjust so that this human can become a part. And so there is this responsibility that this person has to, how do I fit here? Can I be a person who accepts these instructions that Marissa and hers give out that are just so kind of improv style and not firm enough for us? Can I be that person? But there's also the question for the team, can we be the space that gives this kind of structured answer? And I think that question comes out of, does our culture flex enough to accommodate this? And there's no bad answer. There's just, does it flex enough or doesn't it? And if it doesn't, I think the bad answer is when we say, let's do it, and we have people join, and then they don't feel like it's home. Whether that's because we constantly have them not supported enough, support just, not having the tools that they need, and therefore there's a constant failure, not having the relationships they need, so there's constant failure. Whatever we do, we are setting that person up for failure, and that's a bad on us.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting as we get into these conversations of diversity and accessibility and inclusivity and all these buzzwords that are kind of really popular right now, is it comes back to that, like where you say, yes, we can do that, but you haven't actually checked if it's possible for not only the company as a whole, but the team that person will be coming into.
Right. I think generally speaking, what I've heard team leaders and managers say is that they have this big sense of all of what a person needs to know and be able to do. And they're busily trying to get all that into a person, into a 2-week window. All the modules, all the things, and I don't know that that's really what a person needs to be successful. So there is this question, the onboarding roadmap needs to have a defined entry point that says, this is where we're going that will help you to be successful. And it might not be a list of modules you need to know. It might not even be a list of logins. You may not even need to have the most up-to-date, suite, whatever, 4.0. There may be some other things that help you to be able to navigate the changing space so that you can say, hey, my login doesn't work. Could I have it? Or, hey, I'm not sure. This client is asking so-and-so, what do I do? That person is going to thrive so much better than the person who's given the whole workflow. Client A, all the things. Client B, all the things. So I think there's a redefining. What's that minimum? What's the minimum set of aptitudes that help people to be successful here? And how willing are we? What's the space that our team can shift and adjust so that people can fit in and feel like a home here? And then how, once we know those what's, how do we help that happen within 2 weeks, 6 months? I do think that we should give people at least a year. But we do have these kind of markers to, so at the end of 6 weeks, then we just know. Or at the end of 3 weeks, then, did this work for you? Is this good? Love and kisses if it didn't work. But we just, we have this minimum set. And everything else can just be learning in life as we do work together.
Yeah, a year is an interesting marker. I would say definitely within the job market, you see these like pretty typical points of the year where everybody's looking for a job all of a sudden, right? All the jobs become available, all the people are looking for jobs, and it's around the same times of year. Like there's like a spring and a fall. And I think, we're naturally kind of going into those places. I know I always stayed kind of at a place for at least 2 years. And then I got to the point where I was either bored or I could see that they weren't going to ever fit me. Like they were,
Right.
They were never going to make the changes that I needed in order to succeed.
Funny enough, it seems like there's a 2-month window right now. People come on and then make that crucial decision in 2 months. Then after that, then there's the more prolonged thing. So your earlier question about onboarding being successful, do they stay beyond the 2-month marker? Because at least half of them are making that decision within 2 months of being on, in the space. But yeah, right now too, this summer, I don't know if this is because of the fall, like you're saying, but this summer, lots and lots of jobs are changing hands.
Yeah. Well, I think, you get to this point where it's like the people are leaving and they sometimes it can take a while to find a good employee too.
Right.
Where I live, we've gone through seasons where, it might be frozen. Let's see if this is.
Are you hearing me? I wonder if anybody in social media land is hearing me, or if you, Marissa, are hearing me. So I'm not sure if anybody's watching this live, but Marissa just said she lost her internet. Um, so I'm not sure what we'll do. Oh, she's coming back, I think.
This is one of the challenges. Hello, hello. Sorry about that. This is one of the challenges where you are at home and your husband is at home and you only have a Wi-Fi connection. So if he has a meeting, yes, it's sometimes just you lose it.
Knocks
So
you
sorry,
off.
everybody. Anyways, where were we, Faith? Where were we? Good question, huh? I think we were talking about the 2-month and the moving of the summer and the job.
Oh.
So your onboarding could be, I guess you could say, is maybe around that 2-month mark is one of those first markers to kind of say, okay, is this working? And I'll go back to my question. How does a company know that their onboarding is successful or useful or helping people thrive?
I think that I can't say exactly how a company would know, because I think that that's developed as part of the onboarding. I think if you hit the markers that you've developed in your onboarding roadmap, then it's been successful. The trick on that, though, is that you could develop the wrong markers. And so one of the things that I like to ask businesses to think about is how the people who have been successful here, the people who have been integrated well, what did you do? I tend to think that success creates clues. And so let's look at when we've done it well, what we've done. Let's look at how we could measure that, and let's define those as the markers, and then backtrack from there and say, well, how do we make sure? Let's strip it down. So instead of just adding things to the onboarding process, let's strip it down to the essential experiences that we think would help those things to happen. Those things happen. And then when we've had the first one where we've been kind of stingy, kind of lean on, let's focus on having these things happen, then let's ask the question again, did those things happen? And if they happen, then we know after a few iterations, then we know, okay, this is our process that's effective for us. And then if it didn't happen and we're like, oh, it's because this person wasn't a good fit, or it didn't happen because this manager didn't have the experience, training, whatever it is, it's easier now to answer the questions, did it happen? And if it didn't happen, why didn't it happen? Mm-hmm. So often that question of how will a company know? Companies won't know unless they've done the work to answer the question, how do we know when somebody's onboarded well? They have to, and that's going to really be specific. So I work with a team that's a school, how we know in this particular school, how they know that this a teacher's onboarded well is that person's like effective, like what they say about the school and the experience when they're talking to other people, whether they have relationships or not, what the students say about them. There's a whole bunch of intangible, emotional, socio-emotional measures that are used early on that may show up in engagement in classrooms later on, and so on. And so then how do we make sure people have those experiences that build those capacities we're seeing as important in that setting? In another setting, it might be something else. A friend of mine in a large, multi-layered, multinational company, there is each person that's successful has a really good sense of the national roadmap. This is me, and this is how I connect. And people on my team are in this part of the world, but this is how we connect in this. Like that sense is really important for that team. So then how do we build that in without making it laborious? Making it be like, okay, here's an exam you're going to study for it. Study the org chart. I think every organization, every team needs to know what it is for them. And then how do we create it?
So how do you work with organizations and companies to help them create an onboarding process?
Whoever is flexible enough to change the onboarding process, because that's not often the case. Sometimes people don't have permission. I will meet with them to review what they're doing right now and what they don't like. Because if they're calling me, there's something that they're not liking. It could be that there's a high revolving door situation. So it may not be that people aren't happy, but then the turnover is high. Or it could be that there's complaints on the inside. So now they're bringing somebody new in. We should just kind of top to bottom, where do you think the problems are? And then I back out with the questions I said to you before, which is show me some people who are successful here. What did we do there? What did we do there? What did we do here? What are the markers? And then let's pull it down to what do these have in common? And then what are some experiences that could set that up? And then how does that fit within the culture you currently have as an organization, as a team? When we map that out, then we map out a 30-day experience for the new hire. I say 30 days because I personally feel onboarding is a multi-month experience. I don't think we should think of onboarding as like an end-to-end process because people aren't onboarded. I think there's an integration that's happening at the pace of the individual and the team. So we map out a 30-day process and we map out a roadmap for the person that may be multi-month. And then we selectively put in experiences that make sense for that person and that company. Could be a buddy, could be not. Could be that we repurpose team meetings in a specific way. There are different factors depending on what the organization has said they're prioritizing and what works for their culture.
So what are the different ways that people can access your onboarding knowledge?
Getting on the phone with me. I typically spend about a day. If it's a small business setting, it's a single team leader, we could typically spend about a day together. So if people get in touch with me, this seems like something they're interested in, we'll build out a roadmap in a day. A few days later, I'll send my written version of the roadmap. Aside from that, I can kind of be a body on the ground type of experience where let's observe what's happening. Let me look at an existing secret shopper on an existing onboarding experience or talk through with some of the professionals involved and spend a more extensive time auditing the process and then pulling out and saying what's a new strategy that would make sense. And so either of those types of experiences, either one day, let's just knock it out and create something that makes sense for you right now, something lean, something adjustable, and something that you can try and then re-engineer as you go along. Or then a more thorough audit of the onboarding process. Either way, when people talk to me on the phone, and I'll know what to recommend.
Cool. The other thing I want to ask you is, how do people get a hold of you? So I know we've got a Calendly link. I've got your website. But talk about like the different ways that people can work with you when they go to your website. What are they going to find?
So when you go to my website, you see a link primarily to talk to me because it's, I think just like humans are not all the same, neither are teams. And when I listen, I can hear what's needed. I can hear, I make a good recommendation. So I think anybody who's curious about any kind of re-energizing, re-engineering their team, or even in this fluctuating time, getting new people on board, and they want to say, let's do it better than we've done it. Let's talk about that. One way could be the VIP day. In the future, a few weeks to months, I'm designing a course on this for people who are really self-starters and really self-determined, and they're like, no, I can figure this out on my own. Like, I'll have a whole rack of videos and worksheets, and people can direct themselves through it. And so if people are interested in that, also let me know.
Awesome.
But when people go on my website right now, they'll just see a link to talk to me. And I'm like, yes, when we get on the phone, we'll know exactly what's needed.
I love it. Anything else you want people to know about team building, onboarding, working with you?
My podcast, The Peak Performing Team, has a bunch of episodes both on onboarding and on cultivating a culture that helps people feel like they belong, like they thrive, and that really doubles is what some of the literature says, but I think it's exponential, really elevates performance. And so many team leaders will say to me that they're looking for ways to get more to happen, but not take up more time. Everybody is realizing that they have to work longer hours, they're working weekends and so on. And the big crisis right now, the emotional health, mental health crisis, is requiring us to think that we can't just be extending the workday. There's got to be another solution. Yeah. So I talk about healthier ways to work together to still have the productivity that we want. And we do a lot of that on the Peak Performing Team podcast.
Maybe you can send me some of those links and I can update the descriptions so that people can find them easily.
Oh, specific episodes. Sure. There's an onboarding episode and then there are a couple others. Sure. I'll do that.
Send me a few of them. We'll update the descriptions here, post below. Okay. So now I've been asking everybody, what's an obstacle that you have right now in growing your own business?
What's an obstacle that I have right now in growing my own business? I think this is a common obstacle to caregivers. And I'll just say that the burden of care traditionally falls on women in households, whether it's, kids or parents, and I have both. And so this balancing of what I feel and want to happen for my family and separating myself, it feels like separating enough to be in my business and be focused for extended periods of time. That feels hard. And I sometimes wish I could do the like complete separation, like 3 months. I'm just going to pay attention to business. But that even feels like it feels wrong almost. And I think it's a shame that we've built the world in such a way that this integration of life and business feels hard. This integration of real life, not simple life that's nothing's going on, everybody's healthy, we're making all the money we need, and life is good and the government is great. But I mean real life where people are preoccupied by multiple things. Somehow we've taught a story that's hard to do together. And so I'm wrestling with real complicated life and building the business I want, I find that the dissonance sometimes stops me. And then I'm like, woo, I'm gonna watch some Netflix. And I don't judge I need to watch some Netflix, but I do judge the world that we've created that just doesn't have supports for real life.
Agreed. I hear that. I see that. I feel that. What's an opportunity you've got coming up to grow your business?
COVID and the pandemic really rejigged a lot of our thinking around life and work and what we want. And I think that while it's been difficult, what it's done is loosened up some of the rigidity. And so when I say things like inclusion is more important than diversity, because if you try to do diversity without inclusion, what you have is tokenism, and you kind of torture people. When I say that, when people are rigid, they're just like off the wall kind of weirdo. But now there's been so much shaking that people are listening. And so it sounds bad, but there's just this opportunity to kind of say we need to heal, and there are some other ways to heal. This thing that we're doing isn't working, and we're seeing that people are protesting by not going back to work as usual, and workplaces have been forced to be different. And I think there's a real opportunity here for me to use my voice and say exactly, and these are some ways that we could think about it for doing this in the future.
I love that. You kind of surprised me for a bit. I was like, you're like COVID. And I was like, oh, okay. That was not the response.
COVID. No, not that way.
Yeah, I love it. Anything else you'd like to let everybody know about teams, what you do, anything that we've missed here?
I don't think so. Did anybody see it was a basketball? I'm not a sports person, but there was a basketball. Go on my Facebook page. Marissa, I'm going to tag you on it, and you could share it also here. But there was a move on a basketball game recently that I thought, this is the magic of people working together without people really knowing each other. Like, you know each other enough that the world changes right in front of your eyes, and you re-strategize and come up with a winning play. I think this is the thing that gets me excited. Like, we can do that as humans. This is just magic that humans have, that we can read each other well enough we can do this if we really leaned into the power that we have when we work together versus what businesses tell us. So I think there's magic here. I think there's power here. And I love it when we decide that we're going to work through the hard things and figure out how to just be human together.
Agreed. I love that statement. Well, I want to thank you very much. Sorry, my internet decided to jump the ship, if we want to use the same analogy that you had earlier, jumped the ship in the middle of our onboarding process of working together today. I always love talking to you. We could probably go on for hours, and I know we will, but you'll just have to rebook again, and we'll come back and keep talking.
We'll talk about the next thing.
Until the next thing. And thanks everybody for watching this. If you watch this live, I appreciate it. It will be available as well, always on the YouTube. And then we will I'll do some fancy magic editing to take out that spot in the middle where I all of a sudden froze. And it will be available on the podcast as well as on my website, which is createtherules.com. So thanks again, Faith. I'm going to hit the little button that takes us off of all of the lives, and we'll just go